Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. This morning I was offering the reflection about ordination and taking on the precepts as something to be reflected upon as renunciation and a letting go, a relinquishment. So in one sense it is that. It's a way of recognizing one's preferences, one's habits and conveniences and getting a perspective on those and learning to let those go. But it also occurred to me later in the day that also in another from another point of view, the going forth, the ordination, whether it's the 8 precepts, 10 precepts, or more precepts, as a Silatara or as a bhikkhu, that it's also a way of, living in accordance with Dhamma, and it's a way of, in a sense, embodying the wholeness of Dhamma itself. So we can think of relinquishment or letting go as some kind of diminution, or somehow we're sort of letting go of things that were ours, that did belong to us, and we're somehow reduced or diminished. There's less, there's less that we have. But from another point of view, I would say it's a way of letting go of the obstructions to our intrinsic wholeness, if you like. There's a sutta I like to quote very often with respect to the precepts, which is called the Uposita Sutta. Uposita means the moon day, and it's a sutta that is describing how the Buddha conceived the principle of the lunar observance day, and encouraging particularly the lay community to take on the 8 precepts as an observance for that day, as a form of practice for one day in the week, in the 4 lunar quarters. And what he says in that particular teaching, he says, if the lay community, if they take on the precept of not taking life, then they will live as the arahants do, and that will be for their long-lasting welfare and happiness. And similarly with not taking life, with celibacy, with not lying, not using intoxicants, and not only eating in one part of the day, not using entertainment, beautification, and adornment, and sleeping refraining from sleeping on a high or luxurious sleeping place. So each of those, he makes the comment, if a person does this, then that they are living as the arahants do, and that is for their long-lasting welfare and happiness. So in that respect, the precepts, taking on the precepts, is a way of embodying the Dhamma, is a way of embodying the enlightened heart, the enlightened mind. And so rather than a relinquishment or a letting go or an absence, then viewed from that perspective, it's rather the taking on the precepts is a way of formalizing that fundamental nature of reality that is the foundation of this life, this heart, this mind, the nature of what we are. So that rather than being a lessening or a diminution, a reduction of what we are and what we have, in a way, it's sort of uncovering the wholeness, the fullness, the completeness of what we are, quote unquote, what is real within us. So I feel that's a helpful way of relating to the precepts and understanding that. It's a different angle, but I feel that even though the wording of it is, I undertake the precept to refrain from this, refrain from that, refrain from this, refrain from that, it's helpful to see that the natural disposition of an arahant is they cannot deliberately take life. Again, there's a couple of suttas where the Buddha points out the nature of an arahant. They can't deliberately take life. It's impossible for them to steal. It can't happen. They're totally uninterested in sexual activity. They can't tell a lie, and so forth. So that the adoption of the precepts is adopting the behavior of the arahant. And the Buddha points out, by adopting the behavior, you're in a way opening up the door, or say revealing that in us, encouraging and opening up that in us, which is incapable of violence, which is totally honest, which is harmless and kind and unselfish, and is a sort of naturally unneedy of any particular things, to say open up the door to that inner nature. So I feel that's a skillful way, another way of looking at taking on precepts, and to those of us who live according to the precepts, rather than regarding it as a large collection of things we can't do, to look at it as a way, a systematic way of revealing what is already the reality of this heart, this mind, this nature of what we are. Another of the teachings around the precepts that the Buddha gives, that I also like to reflect on, is where he talks about, in this instance, he's talking about the 5 precepts. It's called the streams of merit, that particular sutta. It's in the Book of the Eights, in the numerical discourses, streams of merit. The first 3 in that particular group of 8 is taking refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. It's a great stream, a great sort of current of metta, of blessing in our lives. And then the next 5 are the 5 precepts. And he points out that if you undertake the precept to refrain from taking life, this brings immeasurable, incalculable freedom from fear, freedom from distress, freedom from anxiety to innumerable beings. And even though he's just talking about the 5 precepts in that context, I would say it applies to our lives as monastics, or as anagarics, siladhara, and novices. All of the different strata of monastic commitment, and also for lay practitioners, the different, say, levels of commitment and affiliation that one has with the Buddha Dhamma. That if one is taking that standard, then it's a source of blessing. It's a great gift, a mahadana, and so that is called the giving of fearlessness. So if we undertake these precepts, whether it's as a siladhara, as a bhikkhu, as a samanera, as an anagarika, as an anagarika, as a layperson, by the very fact of choosing to not take life, to respect the life of, we have these very abundant little bugs that are doing extremely well this year, and their season seems to be lasting a really long time. I keep running across them in my kuti and all around, little pointy-nosed tiny bugs that seem to be very happy to be anywhere and everywhere. To respect the life of every single bug, that we are, in that moment, we are bestowing fearlessness. Those bugs, I wouldn't project too much intelligence or discernment into the little creatures, but they can be sure that these big creatures nearby are not going to cause them harm. They're going to move them. They're going to move them as carefully and as kindly as possible. They're not going to deliberately cause fear or distress or pain. So that's a gift to keeping the precepts, and that people don't have to protect their property when they come to the monastery. They don't have to hide their handbag under their cushion, or to worry that people are going to say, hurt them, or steal from them, or flirt with them, or deceive them, to lie to them. So that is the creation of a zone of ease, a zone of safety. And the animals also, they know they can relax around here, and they don't have to be too worried about the humans. I was very blessed to have a badger come to visit my bird bath outside my kuti. I've never met a badger so close in my life before, so it was Badger didn't seem to be the slightest bit bothered by my presence, sitting on the bench, and just came up, took a few sips of water from the bird bath, and took off. So the creatures, they know these two-leggeds are not dangerous around here. They haven't got any of those sticks that go bang and cause harm and pain. That we're safe to be around. So that is something that we can reflect on by just by keeping the precepts that we are, say, bestowing a quality of ease and freedom and peace upon the other beings that we share our lives with. Now, this might be, say, talking in very sort of positive or optimistic terms, and say looking at this side of our training, our practice. But I do feel it's important to consider this. It's very easy for us when spending a lot of time in meditation or just living in community and working together, living together. And the main focus of our lives here is watching our minds, working with our minds, our habits of thinking and action and so forth. And it can be quite frustrating or challenging, despairing sometimes to see the amount of work that needs to be done in order to try and find peace and ease in our lives. I remember many years ago when Ajahn Sujita made the comment that in the Tibetan tradition they have the nundro, the training of 100,000, reciting 100,000 mantras, 100,000 visualizations, 100,000 prostrations. And he said in the Theravada we just have 100,000 frustrations. So it's the Theravadan nundro of 100,000 frustrations. And it can feel like that. And we can get quite wrapped up in our own mind and just endlessly trying to work with our chattering thoughts and restless feelings and qualities of impatience or anxiety, greed or desire, irritation, jealousy, and so on and so forth. And it can get very, very intense, and we can get very despairing about the ability to do anything, to make any serious impact on our minds. And we can get so focused on working with the difficulties and challenges and the obstacles, obstructions, and characteristics of our own mind, our own thinking habits, that we can forget, what we're doing and the standards that we keep. Many years ago, one of the very first community retreats I was on here in England, I think it was about 1981 or so, and at early days of Chithurst, and it was before the shrine room. What's now the shrine room at Chithurst had a big hole in the floor, so it's sort of made by the dry rot, the flourishing dry rot in Chithurst House. The Dhamma hall didn't exist; that was still a coach house. So we were all squished into what's now the reception room at Chithurst. The whole 25 of members of the community were all squished into that one room together, and we'd been on retreat for about a week. And I think Lumpur Sumedho wasn't challenged to read the room. I could see that there was a sort of intense, somewhat anguished, stressful tone in the community. And so one day he gave this reflection, and it was very, very striking because he made the comment that isn't it remarkable? There's 25 people gathered here, and none of you have killed another human being this whole week. That's wonderful. What a marvelous thing. That's not everybody on the planet can say that. You have not deliberately taken a human life this week. Congratulations, well done. This is a wonderful thing. And the first thought is like, oh, I hadn't really thought of that. And he said, and you've been celibate, 25, mostly young women and men gathered together for a week, all up in the same room and gathered together in close proximity for a whole week. And you've maintained the precepts of celibacy. Fantastic, wonderful, well done. This is not a small thing. This is a remarkable thing for human beings to do. Well done, sadhu, sadhu. And he went on in various different ways, as Lumpur can do, kind of riffing on that theme. And you could almost feel, or you could feel, the mood of the room lightening. And people say, oh yeah, right. actually, yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah, and not having noticed that fact that we were working hard to live according to these very noble principles, but that had fallen into the background because of the mind being, say, drawn into focusing on the endless chattering thoughts, or the recollecting, getting lost in memories of the past, or planning the future, and getting drawn into the various forms of mental proliferation. That just seeing the effort that was being made, that the goodness that was being cultivated, just by restraining the urges to be violent, or to be sexually aroused, or to be selfish, or greedy, hard-hearted, or lazy. And so there was a very powerful moment just to be recollecting that sort of background qualities that we can lose sight of, and that we are so easily drawn into the emotions that we have, the thoughts that we have, the patterns of fear and anxiety, the patterns of regret and hope, and or just busyness, just planning and imagining, and being over focused on our list of things to do, that we forget our own goodness. What's drawn us to live together as a group of human beings, to shave our heads, put on robes, and live by the precepts, to abide in a monastery, in a place where there's an absence of it. The biggest entertainment that we have is a library, and the beautiful flower beds. That's about as colourful and as say distracting as the sensory world can get in a monastery. Or of course, there's always food at the mealtime, but the range of distractions are pretty limited. So we come to live an extremely simple life, and I think it's helpful for us to remember what was the impulse that brought us here, to what moved us to come and live in such a simple way. What in us respects the standards of honesty and harmlessness? What in us it loves the good, that rejoices in kindness and compassion? And it's so easy to forget that. It's so easy to get drawn by our list of things to do, or the being fascinated by one person, or anxious about another person, and lost in the mind's creations. We can forget that. So one of the practices that the Buddha encouraged is chaganusati, to recollect your own goodness. And people in the West, many of us who've grown up particularly in the sort of Judeo-Christian conditioning, to think positively about yourself is pretty heretical. That self-criticism or putting yourself down is almost encouraged or expected in the Western world as a sort of a spiritual part of a spiritual practice. But the Buddha did encourage that, to recollect your own goodness, chaganusati, to acknowledge your own generosity, your own kindness, as to look at that quality of goodness. That if you try to move one of these little bugs and you accidentally appear to cause it some harm, the pain that we feel, that's a good pain. That regret of having hurt some little creature that's good pain. That shows that we really love and care for other living beings. That's important to us. And so that, even though it's a painful emotion, it's coming from a profound sense of care and compassion. That's a beautiful, wholesome quality to rejoice in. And all those years ago, it's more than 40 years ago now. So if it was 1981, it's a long, long time ago. But that still sticks with me. That sense of just having that reminder from Luang Por, telling the group, look, don't forget, you've been celibate for a week. You haven't stolen anything for a week. You haven't killed anybody for a week. Well done. This is better than most human beings on the planet can attest to. So don't ignore that. Don't forget that. And then there's the change of mood in the room. There was a sort of, oh my goodness, look at that. So it's not to be inflated or to get egotistical about it. It's not to boost the ego, but to recognize the good that is being done, to recognize that love of the good that has brought us all here. That to not forget that, to not ignore that, I feel is very important. And that's, I would say, also is an informing spirit behind what causes us to want to go forth or to live in a community like this, to spend our time living harmlessly, living simply, having few needs, and learning to care for each other. So on that occasion, I can't pretend I was really able to know exactly what was going on in everybody's mind, but certainly in my own mind, it did shift the mood quite substantially. But sometimes even the best kind of Dhamma instruction or encouraging words, they can't shift that kind of mood. It's easy for us to get really drawn into states of despair, of feelings of hopelessness. There's no way forward. This is impossible. My mind is just completely unworkable. This is absolutely beyond my capacity to do anything with. This is it's more than I can do. It's beyond my abilities to really work with this mind. And that's that kind of despair or hopelessness, that feeling of say powerlessness. It's not uncommon, and even though I tend to be a sort of look on the bright side kind of a character, that I have had my own times of that same kind of profound hopelessness and despair, and living here with Luang Por Sumedho and him giving Dhamma teachings twice a day, and knowing these are really inspiring teachings. This is wonderful. This is great. This is just what is say the most wise and powerful teachings in the world. That the state of mind that had settled there in my citta. This was in the late 80s. When I was living here, there was something just wouldn't shift. It was just this feeling of pointlessness. This is all just Theravada Buddhism and the chanting and bowing and the robes and all of the rules that we keep, the etiquette we have. It's all just a bad joke. It's just a pointless rigmarole. Why do we do all of this stuff? It's just a complete waste of time. And even, as I said, even in the presence of Luang Por Sumedho giving Dhamma reflections every morning, and being around him and other wise and kind members of the Sangha, I just seem to get more and more entrenched in this self-destructive, negative mood. And I remember one day I was actually reciting the Patimokkha, the monastic rule. It's about 13,000 words that you do as a solo recitation. And even in the midst of chanting all of the rules that we have in Pali, there's part of my mind in the commentary box. This is a total joke. What do we do this for? This is a good pointless exercise. It's like 45 minutes of nonsense syllables, and I also trying to remember all the words as I'm chanting at the same time. So it was a strange time. It was very and the sense of dullness and numbness and heaviness and pointlessness was very very profound. It didn't seem any amount of wise words or encouragement from outside could have any effect on it. So I could see this mood really settled in and was there for weeks and weeks, and I was trying all sorts of different kinds of things to shift it, just getting busy. I was already pretty active. get really busy and volunteer for even more things, and that didn't seem to make any effect upon it. And I tried, I thought, okay, this is completely joyless. I need more joy. So I'll just really focus on metta practice, just kind of fill myself with positive energy and just metta. And that made it even worse. It's like Luang Por Sumedho would say, it's like thinking pink. And it was this profound bed of misery covered over with this pink veneer. What it made me think of was many years ago when I was a novice in Thailand. to tell another story. So in the monastery routines, and still as they do today at Wat Pa Nanachat, the International Forest Monastery, and other monasteries, you don't make your own refreshments. There's like one or maybe two kettles of hot drink or cold drink that will be passed around at tea time, and everyone would share in the drink that the novice or the anagarika, whoever was looking after the kitchen, whatever they made, and whatever the novice or the anagarika chose to make, that's what everybody had that day. So I was kind of proud of my abilities as a sweet drink maker, and at that time, in the same monastery, there was my fellow Samanera was a French novice called Tan Jinawaro, not the current French Jinawaro, an earlier French Jinawaro. And he was very serious, very caring person, and it was his turn to make the drink on this particular day. And so I was just sitting in my kuti and waiting for tea time to come. And then he appeared at the steps by my kuti and had this really anguished look on his face. And I said, "Oh, you don't look very well. What's the matter?" He said, "It is terrible." I said, "Well, what's terrible?" "The drink I made, it is awful. It is terrible. I tried to do something with it, but it is awful. It's terrible." And I said, "Okay, don't worry, I'll fix it." So kind of came down the steps of my kuti and made my way to the kitchen and said, "So what did you make? What is it that you've brewed for the tea, the hot drink today?" And at that time, the former Tan Varapanyo had been a great had a very famously sweet tooth when he was a monk, and was obsessed with sugar. Having disrobed and gone back to America, he got into a health trip, as it were. And so he'd sent this big care package, and we thought, "Oh, a package from Varapanyo, this looks good." It was all filled with herb teas, and to the chagrin of a number of the venerables. Anyway, amongst these herb teas was a packet of wormwood. And my dear companion in the holy life had chosen to make the tea with wormwood, which those of you who know your herbs know is extremely bitter. And he'd made this big kettle of wormwood tea, and then having taken a sip, realized, "Oh, this is pretty bad." So he'd tried putting some sugar in it, and that hadn't really helped very much. And I thought, okay, well, let me work on this. And so I thought, well, maybe we can just completely cover the bitterness with even more sugar. So I kind of piled in ridiculous amounts of sugar, and that just was like this sort of layer of pink on top of a bed of bitterness. And I thought, well, maybe try and the extra sweetness isn't working. Maybe put some chili in. Put some chili in just to kind of distract from the awfulness of the mixture of the bitter wormwood and the oversweet sugar. If we put some chili in, that'll kind of divert the attention. And so anyhow, we tried this, we tried that, and eventually the expression on the Venerable Jinawaro's face was getting worse and worse. And I said, well, look, just go back to your kuti and leave it alone. I'll take it, and I'll kind of pretend I'm the drink maker, and I'll take the rap. So I'm not making any great claims, but it was one of the great moments of self-sacrifice in my monastic training, because then I took it into the sala and then offered it to the Ajahn, and they sort of poured out the drink, and then it was each monk in turn, filled the mugs of each of the monks in turn, and there was this this sort of spurting of this foul liquid one by one down the line, and so Ajahn Prabhakaro, Joseph Kapil, was the abbot at that time. He said, "What is this?" I said, "It's a surprise." So that was nobody took more than about one sip, and so they said, "Go make something else." So I rushed off and had to boil up a whole new of stuff. But that mixture of the layer of chili enhanced sweetness over a bed of wormwood was somehow I was reminded of that in this particular period of trying to do piles of metta to overcome this miserable mind state. It didn't work. Anything I tried, it didn't work. It was just sugaring it over, as it were, and that didn't have any helpful effect. And then during that time, then one night I had an extremely vivid dream. And during this dream, I've mentioned this a few times over the years, it was extremely vivid, and I was in, and it's not very palatable, as we say. But what I did was I was pulling off each of my fingers. I pulled off my thumb and my fingers one by one, and I ate them. And even the taste of my fingers was bland. It was like a kind of grey, bland taste. So it didn't even. There was not even any flavor, just pulling off the fingers of my hand. Then somehow I managed to pull the fingers off my other hand as well, even though the fingers on one hand, the left hand had gone already. But somehow I managed to pull the fingers off my right hand. So all that was left was my thumb and my index finger, and everything else was gone. And so suddenly this inner voice said, "Yeah, stop. Yeah, you're destroying the very things that are most useful to you." And then I woke up. I thought, well, that was a message, and it had a very powerful effect, surprisingly, because it was all of the kind of the things to do, or the efforts that or the ideas of what I should do to get out, for me to get out of this this state. Then none of that had really helped very much. But this, in a way, this insight or this sort of intuition had bubbled up from within, and sometimes the me trying to do the right thing, or me trying to work with my life, or me trying to practice, and me trying to get rid of this and become that, it can get so busy and so theoretical, or so much driven by I and me and mine. It's like the team up in the commentary box are really kind of going full steam. It's telling you what's the right thing to do, and what's for the best. That your own intuitive sense, your own natural wisdom isn't able to operate, and so that simplicity of the in a way the intuitive wisdom, recognizing the patterns of thinking that are being believed in, the habits of mind that are being followed, these are destructive. You're destroying that. Buying into these negative states, and also the urge to get rid of them, to fear them, to hate them, and to try and wipe them out. That's only making it worse. And the attitudes of mind are causing, increasing that quality of destructiveness and harm and difficulty. And so that it was interesting, because it was not through anything that I did that the mood shifted, but rather it was that intuitive wisdom that emerged from that in that way, in the imagery of that particular significant dream. So sometimes it is that way, that our heads can be so busy with trying to fix things that our own natural wisdom is being obscured or obstructed. It can't function, and it has to emerge through some kind of say a dream state or a nimitta, an image in meditation, that it comes to the surface and gives a direction, or helps to resolve difficult situations when the habits of self-centered thinking and self-centered motivation are just causing greater difficulty, greater confusion and obstruction. It wasn't really deliberate. It wasn't certainly through trying to develop some kind of a practice. But what happened after that, it was a very impactful experience, having that say a visionary dream, or that vivid, lucid dream of pulling my own fingers off and eating them. It's a completely crazy thing to do. That kind of got the message through. And without me trying to replace that attitude, what arose on its own was a sense of recognizing, well, I'm here. I'm a monk. I live this life because I love the good. I rejoice in that. That's something that's delightful and beautiful. And then quite on its own, the thought arose. Again, I'm not making any claims or trying to sound kind of particularly self-sacrificial, but the thought that arose in my mind was, well, even if I have another 10,000 lifetimes that are completely bland and miserable, like this has been, if I could just do one thing to help one living being in those 10,000 lifetimes, all that time won't have been wasted. And it wasn't really a deliberate thought; it just sort of popped up on its own, and there was something that knew that it was absolutely true. That's a change of mood. But it was a revealing time, and it was a helpful direction that sometimes our very best efforts, if we're dealing with painful negative states, that longing or irritation or fear or regret and so on, they can be so unconsciously driven by the desire to become, the desire to get rid of, that we are unconsciously compounding the very things that we are obstructed by or burdened by, and that sometimes it's these kind of things that the intuitive wisdom emerges in that way, through some event or some kind of circumstance of that kind. A more conscious, image that arose a couple of years later when I was on the solitary retreat in the forest at Chithurst, speaking of sort of mental imagery and such like, was that experience had been very powerful and had helped the mind to emerge from that sort of negative and self-destructive state. But there was still a strong sense of me and my practice, and I've been living at Amaravati for about 3 years at this point. I came here in '85 and had been very engaged in helping with the monastery and getting things established in its early days. And then it was my 10th rains, and so there was only one kuti in the forest in Chithurst in those days, and people would get to take a turn one at a time. That was the only kuti in the forest that we had in that era. There were no kutis here. Everyone was just in the main buildings. So I had my 3 months in the forest at Chithurst, and so the beginning of the retreat was, the first 3 or 4 days was like one long exhalation, like alone at last. This is great. And then after about the 3rd or 4th day, then I started to get right, alone at last, and just me and the walls of my kuti and the sky and the ground, and just the momentum of life at Amaravati began to sort of reveal itself. The momentum of my mind engaged with all kinds of activities and responsibilities and people and things. So the next 10 days or so were extremely intense, just the mind filled with just looking for something to do, something to engage with, something to be in relationship to, kind of wanting to be something. So that was a extremely sort of challenging, difficult period. Every day was an epic. I get to sort of about 5 or 6 in the afternoon and think, this was just one day? That was the morning? It was only like 10 hours ago? It felt like I've been, each day was like 100 years. And I thought, how many more weeks have I got here? But as things evolved and I began to just get used to that intensity of the mind and in that mode, I could see that a lot of the issues was just how my attention would get drawn into the patterns of thinking and would believe the thoughts that were going through and making things important. things I loved, things I disliked, things that I regretted, things that I hoped for, things that I had opinions about. The mind would get really drawn into believing in its thoughts. And so once I had, in a sense, recognized, that's a lot of this is being fueled, the intensity or the kind of the sense of pressure or say the burden of the mind is through believing in the contents of thinking. Then that was the direction I began to look, and could see that if the mind believed in its thoughts and took them to be real and solid, then there was that sense of pressure or intensity, that's stressing. But when there was a recognition of this is just the pigeons crowing in the trees or the sound of the rain on the chestnuts, it's just the noises of the mind, then things got a lot more spacious and peaceful. So not to bore everyone with the details, but a couple of months later, sort of well on into the retreat time, and I was doing a lot of sitting, so hours and hours and hours at a time. And I'd often find a spot in the forest to sit and just park myself for 3 or 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours in one spot. And on this one occasion, I was sitting in this place, and my mind was very, very quiet. And I don't have a very visual mind. Maybe in dream states these images pop up, but in meditation, usually all I see is the back of my eyelids. So I don't have. Luang Por Sumedho has an extraordinary ability to visualize and has a lot of color and form in his meditations. But I would just close my eyes and see the back of my eyelids, and that would be it. But on this particular occasion, again, not making any claims, but I was very surprised to see this fairly distinct mental image emerge after a couple of hours. And so it was quite a long time into the retreat. So the mind and the whole system was quite settled and peaceful. And the image that took shape in the mind, and I was mentioning this in an online Dhamma talk a week or so ago, so that's one of the reasons it comes to mind. So I pictured myself, or there was a picture of myself in the mouth of a cave. There was some kind of a cave in a mountainside, and in front of me there was a vast starry night sky. And so I'm at the edge of the cave, and there's this pull, this sort of draw, attraction to this great vast sky filled with sparkling stars, and this sense of, I want to be out there, out in the infinite space of the universe. And as that feeling of, I want to be out there, I want to be in that space, I want to enjoy that freedom, then as that I want to be, or feeling arose, there was this very distinct sensation of a shackle around my ankle, like a handcuff or leg cuff, a shackle around my ankle and a chain, and I could feel this my leg being fastened by this manacle, this chain, and so I couldn't leave the cave and merge with the great infinite sky, and then feeling that sort of that weight, that pull on my leg. But then if there was a letting go of self, like letting go of me who wants to be free, me who's stuck here, me being held down, me not able to be out in the void, then I could feel that the chain dissolving, that the kind of shackle would sort of disappear, and then there was a quality of freedom and a sense of wonder. So there was the mind was able to attune to the space of the starry void, the starry infinite sky. And then as soon as the mind thought, now I'm free, and the shackle, the I am came in, and then I could feel the chain on my leg once again. So I thought, that's interesting. As soon as there's an I am, there's that bondage, and there's a me that's held back. As soon when the I am is let go of, then there is the wonderment of the infinite space, but no me who's enjoying it. And so, again, I don't have a very visionary mind or visual mind in this way, but this image sustained itself for a long time, like an hour or more. And just sort of going back and forth between the I want, I am, and then there's this feeling of being chained and shackled, and then letting go of the I am, and then that quality of freedom, but no me who can enjoy the freedom, no I who has got something. And so again, just like with the dream of eating my hands, there was okay, this is a message. And that it was extremely potent and helpful, because it was there had been this presumption, even though I've been a monk for 10 years, my 10th reign, so I've been in robes for quite 10 years. By that time, there was that sense of what can I do to be free? I want to be free. I'm doing this in order for me to be free, and not really, even though hearing teachings about not self on a daily basis, and with incredible Dhamma teachings from Lumpur Sumedho and the other great Ajahns of our tradition, it hadn't really quite penetrated that what that I am feels like, its nature, its character, and how even though we talk about not self, or even giving teachings about not self, you're explaining it to other people. Still, the mind it can subtly and unconsciously keep creating that I want to be free. If I do this, I will get that. And the words or the ideas of not self are still creating that kind of say, not having the profound effect of really freeing the heart from those self-creating habits. That the words are there, the ideas are there, but the habit of identification is still going on, in spite of the words, in spite of the conceptual knowledge. So that was a very helpful, powerful, experience in that respect, and was really informative in terms of it's not just the idea of not self or being able to explain it, but that actual tensing of the heart around even if the words aren't there, that I want or I must, that say clenching of the heart, that grasping, that conceiving, the manyati is a Pali word for that. That was a really powerful and helpful opportunity to know that conceiving, the I am being conceived, and then recognizing when it's not conceived, there's a quality of peacefulness, and also realizing that the person is the prison, so that if we want to be free as a person, it's never going to happen, because the person is the prison, that which might be disappointing. But in spiritual terms, I feel this is very helpful to open the heart to that, to recognize that as long as the mind conceives an identity, a person, an I, then that very conceiving, that's the prison. That's the thing that creates the limitation, that the chain around the ankle that is always going to condition that quality of confinement or limitation. Maybe while I'm on the theme of this dreams and visions and such like, just another one that comes to mind is kind of say follows along from that. Was that even though that was an insightful time, once the retreat was over and I was back in circulation again, and it was very very easy for the I ams all to come rushing back in and to reconstitute themselves. So that was a significant moment, a helpful insight to see that conceiving, that manyati process as it happens, but just by recognizing how it works, by sort of seeing it once, it doesn't mean that the habit is thereby relinquished. And another helpful say, set of circumstances that came about, again, just on the theme of significant dreams and visionary states. Not that Dhamma practice has to revolve around these kind of things, but just while I'm on the subject for the evening. So for years and years, there was a repetitive dream that I had. I would consider myself quite a non-violent person, and obviously, and also being a Buddhist monk, we have a non-violent way of life. But in these particular dreams, and I had them ever since I was a teenager, there would be some kind of threatening presence, or a presence that was perceived as dangerous or threatening, and that I would feel, it's that person. That's a dangerous being or a dangerous entity. I've got to protect myself. And so I had this dream for years and years, and it was never really clear what it was that was threatening. And again, as I said, I was not. I don't think of myself as a violent person, but in these dreams, I would be trying to protect myself, and sometimes I'd be throwing rocks at this person, this being, or sometimes I'd be punching, and I could feel my fists sort of landing on this person, or hitting them with a stick. And whatever I did in these dreams, the presence was always there, and never seemed to be the slightest bit bothered by any kind of thing that I was doing, whether I was throwing rocks or hitting it with a stick or punching or sticking sticking a knife in. It was just like, really? Oh, now it's a stick. Okay. Last month it was rocks, and it seemed to have no effect whatsoever. But I always had this sense of fear. I've got to protect myself. This is dangerous. This is awful. This is difficult. And I would wake up and think, what was that about? Or what's going on there? And it never caused any harm. There was never any kind of difficulty or pain that this presence ever caused in any of those dreams. And so it was puzzling. And every 2 or 3 months, I'd have another one of these, often in a different mode. And then into monastic life, well into monastic life, I kept getting these dreams from time to time. I thought, who is that I keep feeling threatened by, and why do I react so violently? And because it never actually does any harm. So why do I always do that? That's strange. It's weird. What's going on here? So then, when I was on my first visit to the States, this was in 1990, and I had another recurrence of this particular dream. And in this one, I was wrestling with this entity. And it was an extremely vivid dream, rather like the one with the fingers. It was extremely vivid, very colorful. I was like, okay, now it's that fighting dream, it's that battling dream. Now, and I was sort of locked in this wrestling hold. I was like, now, okay, I'm really awake, I'm alert in this dream. Now I'm going to find out who it is that I've been fighting against. All these years, I keep being threatened by this strange entity. And now, since this dream is really clear, really colorful, now maybe I can find out who it is that I'm fighting. And as these thoughts took shape in my mind in the dream, then the other being lifted their head up, and surprise, surprise, it was me, with a kind of a sort of cheeky smile on its face. That surprised, look who it is. So then I woke up. I thought, well, that's interesting. What was that about? And so that, and but the look on my face. Well, if that's me there, then who's this? Who's doing the fighting from this side? So I thought this is very strange. But it was followed shortly after by another dream, again, not to dwell too much on these, but just to complete the picture. So in this one, when I saw that was me, looking completely undisturbed and with a sort of smile on my face and looking slightly surprise, surprise, that I say was a cause for reflection. Well, what's this about? There's something going on here. There's some kind of a message here. There's something that's not being understood. And then a little while later, then it was a very similar dream, but I was in the role of being thumped or being attacked. I was the attackee. And the other figure was in this particular dream scenario. It had taken the shape of someone who used to visit here, Amaravati, back in the old early days of the monastery, who was had a particularly egotistical character. I wouldn't say that he was an egotistical person necessarily, but the way he manifested and expressed himself came across as a very kind of pompous, proud, arrogant, sort of professorial type. Like, I know everything, kind of. So it was a sort of archetype of pride and conceit and ego. Really, it was a kind of embodiment of ego. And so in this particular scenario, then I was being attacked by this other person, and then as this other being was attacking me, I was in the role of that mysterious figure, and no matter how much he sort of thumped me or hit me, nothing bothered me. I wasn't the slightest bit anxious or frightened or wasn't uncomfortable. I thought, oh, poor fellow, he's really upset. He seems to be quite enraged and affronted, and oh, poor guy. Wonder why he's so upset, so uptight, because it had no effect on me whatsoever. And so then, okay, well, this is a bit pointless, standing here being thumped. He doesn't even hurt very much. I'm not very worrying or difficult. And so I just thought, okay, well, I'm going to take off, and I walked away. Anyway, I won't bore you with the rest of the scenario, but so when I woke up from that, I thought, well, okay, that is very interesting, and it seems to be a partner to that earlier dream. And what reflecting on that, because it was extremely clear and vivid, again, I felt it was the inner wisdom, as well as the intuitive wisdom, trying to come to the surface, while the too much activity going on in the head, and the mind distracted. This kind of change of perspective that was very significant, very important in terms of Dhamma, was kind of showed itself in this succession of images, and so that it was really, to me, it was pointing out how as long as we live from a position of self-view, then the Dhamma is, or nature, reality, is this sort of threatening thing that I've got to establish myself against. I'm threatened by the way things are. I've got to assert myself. I've got to. I want to make sure I'm okay, and that the way things are doesn't intrude or doesn't distress or doesn't interfere or upset. And so then in this, this is how I read it, and any of you who are interpreters of dreams or therapists might read this in a completely different way. So I'm open to alternative versions, but the way that it was read was that when the mind lets go of self-centered thinking, and takes a Dhamma-centered perspective rather than a self-centered perspective, then that's what was happening in this kind of dream state, is that the ego is sort of thumping away at reality, trying to protect itself or assert itself, and reality is like, oh, poor thing. Why are you spending so much energy? Why are you getting so distressed trying to assert yourself? This is all a bit pointless. Again, I'm not making any kind of claims or assertions of attainment or anything, but it just, I was dreaming at the time. So I don't think anyone's ever been enlightened in a dream state, at least that I know of. But it was, in a way, symbolizing I feel a very helpful and important aspect of Dhamma practice, that if we are embodying or taking a self-centered perspective on life, then it's rather like that, feeling threatened, having to defend yourself, and pointlessly thumping away at this threatening way things are, needlessly. And that if we let go of those self-centered habits and we instead live from a Dhamma-centered perspective, we embodying Dhamma, being Dhamma, recognizing that that which knows the person isn't the person. The heart is not a person. The mind is not a person. The mind is Dhamma. Then that there's a sense of invulnerability. There's a sense of ease and spaciousness. There's no danger. Nothing can be lost. Nothing can be harmed. That the Dhamma is the refuge, is that which is secure and stable, invulnerable, inviolable. So that again was a powerful insight that sort of was, and I think happened despite my best efforts in the meditation hall. But I feel that sometimes there are these significant images that bubble up to the surface, whether it's in a meditation state or whether it's through a dream or a vision or whatever source it might come from. That once in a while these are very trustworthy. They have beneficial effects, and that to me it was very helpful, because rather than the framework or the format of practice being me practicing the Dhamma or me realizing the Dhamma, in that shift of perspective, that sort of change of roles in that symbolized in that imagery, there was rather than me realizing the Dhamma, it's the Dhamma realizing the me, the awake mind recognizing all those personal qualities of being a woman, being a man, being old, being young, being tall, being short, being healthy, being unhealthy, being excited, being unhappy, being lazy, being focused. That which knows those personal qualities isn't a person. It's an awake, aware quality. That's the Buddha refuge. That awake, aware wisdom that is the primary function of Dhamma. The Buddha arises from the Dhamma. The awake mind, the awakened awareness arises from the Dhamma, which is the foundation of reality. So that it was one of those times. I remember. I think that was about 1991. So it was the year after I'd had that initial sort of waking up and finding myself as the opponent in that wrestling match. It was about a year later that this other dream came about with the proud and pompous professor. Purple, he was kind of purple with affronted pride. It's like kind of enraged, and it was like a perfect symbol of the ego. Like, don't you know who I am? Yes, yes, I do. And that was a very say helpful, because and I feel that all of us can reflect on that when we are framing the practice in terms of me practicing, me working with my mind. It becomes so personal, and as Luang Por Sumedho often says, encourages, don't take your life personally. that in the heart, which can recognize these thoughts, these feelings, these moods that are happening here, these perceptions that are felt here, but we don't have to personalize that. We don't have to create a person out of that flow of perceptions, that experiential field, and. So just again, just taking a simple statement like "don't take your life personally," if that's really embodied, if that's taken seriously, moment by moment, this chain of thought, this memory, this plan, this heaviness of the heart, this excitement, to reflect. This isn't a person. It doesn't belong to a person. It's just a pattern of nature, like the shape of a leaf or the flow of a stream, the movement of a cloud. That's what this is. We call it a person out of convention and habit, but to not take our life personally, then that's the way that we are living from a Dhamma-centered perspective rather than a self-centered perspective. And the result of that is that quality of ease and freedom and spaciousness, a sense of say unboundedness and invulnerability. That nothing can shake that, nothing can disturb that. That's the imperturbable, the anenja. So I offer these thoughts for consideration this evening.